Welcome back into Straight from the Pitch. I'm Anna Whitty, joined as always by Scotty Schweitzer. This week on the podcast, we have another exciting guest. Washington Spirit midfielder Marissa Sheva comes on to talk about her hip injury. She talks about her journey through the NWSL, and we're headed towards the World Cup, and she has landed a spot on the Ireland national team. So we talk about her journey from her hip surgery recovery all the way up to where she is at her point in her career with NWSL and with her national team. So that is first up on this week's episode. We are now joined by Washington Spirit midfielder and Ireland national team midfielder Marissa Sheva. Sheva, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to start with your hip injury. You went through that process. I would love for you to kind of walk us through that and how you mentally and physically came back from that to start playing right away in the NWSL.
Yeah, of course. First, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be chatting with you guys today. That was a tough one. I tore my labrum in my left hip, and that was probably the most serious injury I've experienced in my entire career, collegiately and professionally so far. And it also came during a time where I was uncontracted. So it kind of left me really struggling to... I don't know. I didn't know anyone else that had that same surgery as me. And I felt like I had been out of it for a while. I had my first NWSL contract with the Utah Royals in 2020. And I got waived, which was crazy, eye-opening, kind of soul-crushing. And then on my way back trying to find a team to play for, I ended up really injuring my hip. And so I got that surgery, rehabbed really hard. That was October of 2021. Rehabbed really hard because I wanted to try to jump into the 2022 NWSL season. And thankfully, the Spirit needed training players at the time. And I reached out to head coach Chris Ward at the time, and he said, "Come on down." And yeah, from there, it kind of it took off in a way that I'm so grateful for, but definitely was not expecting.
You talk about coming back from your hip, and the first places that you're get a chance kind of is with the Spirit. And as you look at your thing, you got signed as a COVID replacement player, then you re-signed as an injury replacement player, and then a national team replacement player, and now a fully contracted player. So just the perseverance. What kind of perseverance does it take just to keep fighting and fighting and fighting to get your opportunity and then take hold of it basically?
Yeah, I think that's a word that comes up a lot when I talk about my story. But in the moment, it doesn't feel like I'm persevering. It almost feels like, throughout that whole thing, I really, truly just believed in myself. I knew that I deserved a shot. Looking back now, I'm proud of myself. It feels like perseverance. But in that moment, it was kind of just eyes on the next thing. So I came in to start training with the Spirit at the beginning of May. And I'd played soccer. I had done technical stuff, but I hadn't been exposed to contact yet. And I just jumped right in with the team, and things were going a lot better than I anticipated, probably better than the staff at the time was anticipating, because I told them that I was going to be really, rusty, and I didn't know what to expect. And then, someone on the team got COVID. I think at the time there weren't any full contracts open, if I'm remembering correctly. But I was training well, and someone got COVID. And I remember they flew me. I got a physical last minute. They flew me to Gotham after the team had gotten there. And that was really special because that's probably the closest market to home. So last minute, my family was able to get to New Jersey and watch me debut for the Spirit, and also make my NWSL debut there. And then, from there, like you said, it was an injury replacement, an NTR, and then a full contract, which, was very exciting.
Yeah, now you're in your 1-year contract with the Washington Spirit in the 2023 season. And you mentioned perseverance as a big part of your story. But when it comes to the small details of on and off the field stuff you took care of to get yourself a 1-year contract and eventually land a spot on the Ireland national team, and we'll definitely touch on all that in a bit. But what are those small details that you took care of off and on the field that led to this success now?
That's a good question. I think that I do very well with a routine and with schedules. So I worked with a great physical therapist before I even came in with the Spirit, and just every single day trying to get my mobility back, trying to get my strength back. And I continued that plan even here with the Spirit. I immediately got on a rehab plan with the Spirit once I got here. Yeah, and then just trying to make sure that my body was recovered for the next day of training, because I don't know if I fully updated the training staff at the time, just how fresh my injury was. But I felt like every day of training was like a 90-minute game. I was toast after every single training session for those first couple weeks that I was here. So, yeah, I just took recovery really seriously. I was focusing really heavily on the mental piece of the game at that point too. For the first time in my career, a lot of mindfulness, a lot of walks, a lot of meditating. And I think that helped me stay present and probably not get too overwhelmed with, what contract's next? Am I going to be on a contract next week? Am I going to end up on a full-time contract here with the Spirit? So it definitely helped me, remain grounded and just kind of focus on the next day of training.
You guys are 3-0-3 and one of only two teams still undefeated. How has Mark Parsons changed the dynamic of the dressing room, the locker room, the field, the trainings? Because this weekend there were some really good games, but I think when we look back on it, the Spirit, you guys were by far the cream of the crop and really took it to San Diego. And I don't think they had any answers for you. And I think 3-1 was closer than it really was. The score was closer than it really was on the field.
Yeah, I think that Mark Parsons has been an incredible addition, and he has definitely, like, from last year to this year, we've done a full 180. And I think a lot of it just has to do with our belief in each other, our belief in our game plan. The energy in the locker room right now is like nothing I've ever experienced. And I think that's a huge credit to our staff and also the girls. We were so pumped to be back home at Audi in front of a massive crowd. And that was the best I've seen us play this year. But even going back today before training and looking at video, we knew that there were a lot of things we did really well, but it was almost more exciting to see the plays that we missed or the things that we weren't doing so well, because we noticed like they're easy fixes. And so, I mean, we're hoping by the end of the season that our performance against San Diego is kind of like our average performance. We think that there's a lot of room to grow even more. So that's what we're mostly excited about.
You kind of mentioned the fact that things have changed and there's excitement in the locker room. And a piece that your coach and Mark Parsons speaks a lot about, and the reason he came to Washington, was Michelle Kang taking over the team. And we've read about what she's done to help change women's soccer, grow women's soccer. We hear about stuff on broadcasts, but you as a player in the locker room, in the training room, day in and day out, what are the small details that she has changed that maybe we don't see that you really do recognize?
Ooh, I mean, nothing that she does is really small. She's incredible. We are so lucky to have her. I think the biggest thing is that we just feel so supported. And this is the most professional environment in the NWSL right now. It's the most professional environment that most of us have played in. And we don't go a day without feeling, incredible support from our staff. It's not even a little thing, but our performance and medical staff doubled from last year. The attention to our bodies, our load data, all of that kind of stuff is top notch, top of the line. Having Dawn Scott, head our performance team has made a huge difference. Just making sure that everyone feels like they're at the top of their game every single day. I think that's probably been the biggest thing this season.
You mentioned it real quick just now, but how different is it playing in Audi? Because it seems like when you guys, before the games and then at the games, it just seems like something like you really feel like you need to protect it and take care of it and then impress and entertain your fans. It just seems like you're good on the road, but you're just a different animal at home.
Yeah, we love playing at Audi. I think that there is a big emphasis in the locker room before the game to protect our home field. We love our fans, and we get a lot of energy from seeing our fans fill up Audi, because I think that's been a big push from our business side of things. We know that as players, that our business team is working their butts off to try to fill the seats, and grow the community around our team in DC. So that just gives us so much energy. Yeah, and it's just a different feeling. I think we have one of the most fun environments to play in the NWSL right now. Objectively, I mean, I'm probably very biased, but you love going to LA and Portland because they're always going to bring a massive fan presence, and I think that we are growing in that way. Yeah, and it's just fun to play in front of. I mean, everyone loves a crowd, so yeah.
One part of your game, you kind of gone international now. Well, not kind of. You have gone international playing for the Ireland national team. You're from Sellersville, Pennsylvania originally, but what was the process to become an Irish national team player, citizenship wise?
Yeah, so my mom's side of the family's Irish. Both of her parents are from Ireland, and my grandfather had been getting on me for a while about getting my passport. So I didn't. I knew that I probably could have gotten it a little bit quicker if I had gone through the FAI and told them that I was interested in, coming on trial. But I started the process back in the beginning of 2021. I think um, the year that I was uncontracted and dealing with injuries and all that. So I got that started, but it was taking a while. And then finally, I don't know who it was, somebody really encouraged me to reach out to Vera to see if she had any interest in bringing me into a camp. And I sent her some clips. And thankfully, I had clips from a few games when I was a national team replacement player and all of that. I had a few 90-minute games under my belt to send to her, and she was interested. And from there, yeah, it kind of took off. And I joined them for my first camp in February of this year in Spain.
We watched you guys play against the US, and you kind of had a low box, sat deep. You played with like a 4-5-1. But going into the World Cup, you have Nigeria, Australia, and Canada. Three teams similar to the US, whereas you have to be aware of their physical presence, their tactical, and their technical ability. Is that something you guys will be looking to play as long as things go on your terms and you're not looking and searching for goals? But is that the system that you guys will probably implement going into the group stage of the World Cup?
I would say so. Yeah, it suits us really well. It suits our personnel well, and I think teams find it really difficult to play against it. I mean, I think we gave the U.S. two really good games, and they struggled with our low block. And I think that we're only getting better. I mean, I've only been into a couple camps now, but I was so impressed with us in the two games against the U.S. And I think that our formation, it would be tough to switch it now. I mean, so with the World Cup coming so soon, but my best guess is that we'll continue to play that system.
Yeah, we talked about it here on the podcast how well you guys played against this U.S. women's national team, and one aspect that I think is so interesting is how has going to this Ireland national team, your experience at the NWSL, how is it different, and how is it maybe the same in some ways?
Yeah, it's just another level of intensity and competition, and I had heard that from my friends that I've played with on various international teams, but it was really cool to experience that, especially playing in international matches. It's just crazy, but I think personally, it's given me. It's awesome to play under another coach. It's awesome to play in a different formation and with different players that play, mostly overseas, and get perspective from them. And I feel like I come back from those experiences back to club a better player, a more confident player. And so, yeah, it's been a really awesome experience for me these past few camps.
You were number 27 at Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
25 with the Spirit, and 24 when you played for Ireland. Is there any reason for the numbers being so similar, or it's just something that kind of worked itself out that way?
No, it just worked itself out. I mean, I was always number 27 for club with Penn Fusion back in the day because it was my dad's hockey number, and I joined that team late. And so I kept 27. I was able to get 27 at Penn State. And then we had a full roster last year when I joined the Spirit. I think 25 was the lowest number. So I just took it, and I don't know if it's wrong, but the numbers don't mean too much to me. So I just decided to keep it for this year. I had the option to change it, but I think my family had already ordered their jerseys, so I just let it go.
So, your experience in Ireland, you're playing with players who culturally, soccer wise, have completely different backgrounds than you. What are some of the things that you've learned and you've taken away from just spending time with these teammates on your Ireland team?
It's been so fun. And we chat about the differences a lot between the NWSL, and a lot of them play in the Women's Super League, and just the difference. I mean, they watch our games, we watch their games, so there's a lot of breakfast, lunch, and dinner conversations revolving around mostly the differences in the leagues, and just how athletic the NWSL has become. And I think I knew that, but watching Katie McCabe play in her Champions League matches, watching just how different the style of play is. I get excited because I enjoy that type of soccer too. So I get excited to, go back into camp with them, because I feel like we do try to play that way a little bit more. But I do think that, the athletic style of soccer that I am playing here in the NWSL just benefits me. Because it's a common style, I think, on the world stage, playing international soccer. But it's definitely fun to play a little bit more combination style, and more of like a slow build when I'm in national team camps.
You're with the national team and World Cup and stuff, but what's it like day in and day out to be able to play? Because I feel the Spirit roster is one of the best rosters in the league, but you guys get to train against each other every single day, and I think that's what makes great teams great, is they have to train against each other, the best team, every single day, where then the game becomes a little bit easier on the weekend. Now, granted, the NWSL is a phenomenal league with some phenomenal players, but to be able to go against the Sanchez's, the Sullivans, the Rodmans, the players that you guys, the Stobbs, the players you guys have, what does that do for your game? And then now being able to, if you go with Ireland, you'll be playing against a lot of U.S. players that you train against and have some insight into that other players won't basically have.
Yeah, I mean, we joke about that. I think I love how competitive our training environment is, but it's such a bubble. You could leave training thinking, I just had the worst training session of my life, but I was also 1v1 defending Trinity Rodman the entire training session, so it's humbling, but also, you're getting better every single day. And I think that it just benefits, our starting 11, if we're, playing 11s, and our non-starters are playing as Orlando, I think that there are days even where our non-starters are going at our starters, and I think that it just raises the level. I feel, and everyone feels, that we have a really deep roster too, which is super exciting for, Challenge Cup matches, just to be able to rest legs. I mean, it's a long season, so we're lucky to have that deep roster, and to, be able to compete with some of the best players in the world every single day.
Yeah, you mentioned the long season between NWSL play, Challenge Cup play. Obviously, you have the World Cup coming up in the next few months. How have you started to pace yourself here in beginning of May?
Yeah, it's tough because I think that we're all so competitive, and everybody wants to play. You want to play every single minute. You want to stay after training and work on XYZ. But our performance staff is great about that, managing players' loads so that we can't make the stupid decisions that we probably want to make. But yeah, I think it's also managing expectations individually. So I think, especially when I go away to camp, I need to remind myself that these girls have been in season since August, September, and they are fully sharp. And I'm still in preseason, and so managing expectations that way, I'm only going to get sharper personally. The team's only going to get better. But so managing expectations, especially after a big win like San Diego, where we played our best game of the season so far. Just, understanding that that's now the standard. It's only going to get better. We still have a lot to work on.
I always ask players that have a dream to become a pro and then fulfill their dream. But as a young player, who was the player that you looked up to and wanted to emulate as a player?
Oh, I feel like I had a few. I loved Christine Lilly as a kid. I couldn't get enough of her. And so I would say I was probably the biggest Christine Lilly fan when I was little. But I mean, and then classic, I loved watching Marta. I loved watching Tobin. I remember watching her a lot when she played at UNC. So those were probably the three big players that I remember watching a lot when I was little and wanting to be just like them.
We had Sam Coffey on earlier, and she also mentioned Christine Lilly. I hope
Oh,
Christine
really?
Lilly watches and sees how many people she's inspired to become, great soccer players, great women's soccer players. It's pretty cool that there was a first, and she was the same, not a hesitation.
Yeah.
It was Christine Lilly.
I think all of my, youth size U.S. women's national team jerseys are Christine Lilly. So that's funny. That's awesome. I'll have to text Sam about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm sure she would love to hear it. We known you to play at Penn State. You played in the wide areas a good bit. We've seen you play centrally a little bit. I'm curious where you kind of prefer to play and also where you feel like is your strong suit right now and you're starting to adjust well in NWSL and international play.
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I was a 10 my whole life, before college, but I think a lot of top players in the club game kind of just get thrown in the 10 because, just you have a lot of freedom and you just try to get on the ball and score. And then Erica Dombach turned me into a 7-11, but I would occasionally pop into the midfield. And now in my pro career, I feel like I've been an 8 for a majority of it. I played out wide last year a little when, Trinity Rodman was gone for qualifying, but I'm comfortable out there. I do think that I'm probably best suited in the midfield as an 8. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough going from, not really playing in the midfield in the college game. I think my biggest thing was speed of play as coming into the pro game. I was catching up to the speed of play here was tough for me to, put it lightly. So that's kind of been an adjustment. I feel like I'm finally there. And yeah, so I would say the 8. Still working on it, but we play in a diamond right now. So playing off the side of the 8 is kind of a good sweet spot because I can go wide, I can stay central. And I think it's honestly been good for my individual development, just getting more comfortable in the middle of the field.
This weekend, it was obvious that you were playing a diamond, and your diamond for most of the game was shifted to the left. I feel it shifts a little to the left side of the field. I think that's just the way San Diego kind of set up and the way the game was being played. But for you guys, you look super, super organized. And I understand that's coaching and that's week buildup. But then when the game starts, there has to be someone on the pitch that is basically coaching the team as a player. Who is the one that's organizing? And because you guys were really, really clean in your organization and your spacing this week. And I think that was not just your quality on the ball, but that I think really is what gave San Diego the most trouble is they were so disorganized, basically. They looked like a team playing as individuals, and you guys look like you were all playing to each other's strengths. So who on the field is really doing all that organization because it's a different view from the sideline than it is on the field. So there's going to have to be a voice on the field that kind of sets us all up.
I think our biggest voices on the field are probably Andy Sullivan and Aubrey Kingsbury. Both of you can hear them the entire game. Andy's definitely organizing the midfield the entire game. She's incredible at that. But I also think that we're just really set in our principles. Our press is organized, and when our front 2 go, our midfielders know how to lock them to one side. We know what players we are, responsible for in those situations. So I think that it's a little bit of both, but yeah, Andy's leadership on the field, especially in the midfield, is just incredible. And I'm sure you guys can hear it from the sideline. Aubrey has the loudest voice on the field, so she's always yelling at us too.
Yeah. Coach Parsons has talked about Kingsbury a lot too, saying how important her leadership is. And so I can definitely see that and hear it for sure on broadcast. Parsons at the beginning of the season said it would take about like 8 to 10 matches to really start hitting the stride of the team. But you just played in match day 6, and it looks like you guys have really started to hit your stride. Where do you, as a player and the one playing within Parsons' system, who he has a way he wants to play and he's been very vocal about that, where do you feel like you as a team and understanding how he wants to play are at this point going into match day 7?
Yeah, I remember him saying that at the beginning of the year when people were a little bit stressed about or frustrated coming off of a session where we played a lot of 11s and things just weren't clicking. And even in a few games that we scrapped out a win, people would come off the field frustrated because it wasn't the way that we wanted to play. Things were not clicking. And then, yeah, I think we finally had a game that put everybody at ease. We feel like we're finally getting it. Things are clicking. So it's really exciting. Hope it continues. I think in the NWSL, and Parsons has said this too, there's always a few ugly, ugly games where you just have to gut out a win. And I think we've had a couple of those already. Our opening game being one of them, the OL Reign game, where you just, it's not going to be pretty soccer, but you just got to get 3 points in this league. But we're excited. The vibe in the locker room is great right now, obviously coming off a big home win, but super excited to take a trip out to the West Coast and test ourselves against LA, which is always a tough environment. They draw a massive crowd, and they just had an awesome game this weekend. So yeah, it'll be tough, but I think we're excited to see if we can put together back-to-back solid performances.
We talked about it earlier in the show, and I agree with you. I think LA, you cannot look at where they're sitting in the standings. I think you guys, I think Portland, obviously, LA, and after this week, and I've said the Reign are good, but they remind me of Houston in a bit that they're a little disjointed. They're playing basically off of just pure talent and getting away with it, where I think the better teams have talent and then are organized. And I was going to say Carolina looks like a good team, but I would think this weekend will be a huge battle going to LA, especially if Julie Ertz is back on the field, because they're a little bit different when she plays, but they are a team that's starting to find their stride too. So when you play this weekend going on the road, will there be any different? Will you play your game, or will you play a game that's necessarily to win, but maybe not your favorite style as a team?
Yeah, we have a Challenge Cup game Wednesday, so we're a little bit more focused on Orlando at the moment. So we haven't really, dived into how we're going to play against LA. But we always play our own game, and that's our goal. We make slight adjustments based on personnel or whatever shape LA we anticipate them to play in. But yeah, we'll try to play our game, and I think emulate the way that we played against San Diego as best as possible.
Yeah, there's so many good matches in the NWSL week in and week out. And Scotty and I always say, like, you don't know what's going to be the good match until you watch all 6, because it could be anybody's game, anybody's given weekend, which makes this league so fun and probably a little tough to play in. But at least for us, we enjoy watching it. So thanks for the entertainment. But Sheva, safe travels out to LA this week. And thank you so much for your time. It was really fun to hear a little bit more about your backstory and all the things you've done that led up to your success so far. So good luck.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I'll tell you what, every time we talk to an NWSL player, meet an NWSL player, hear them speak, I am just more enthralled at how wonderful these women are. What great role models, intelligent, hardworking, just something really good for our future generations to inspire to be. Again, a great guest, real knowledgeable, exciting times for the league because so many great players in it with great people.
Completely agree. And Sheva's demeanor as well, and how she really took her injury head on and has taken a good look at her career and has acknowledged kind of where she's at and how it's not a marathon, or it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So just where she's at in her career, she's taking it day by day. I think going to the World Cup is huge for her career, not only on the national team, but will help her bring that back to NWSL. And I always love seeing players. I saw her about a year and a half ago, right after her hip surgery, and seeing how far she's come since that, because that's not a minor surgery. And seeing, her development and how she's come and how she's making huge impact on this Spirit team is super fun to watch. So we'll continue to follow her career. I'm sure we'll talk with her at a later date. But before that, we're about a seventh of the way into the NWSL season. A seventh of the way. We're almost into match day 7. We're a third of the way into the NWSL season, which is crazy to think. But we started to see where teams are at, how they're progressing, what we think they'll look like as this season progresses. So Scotty and I have made what we think is our rankings. Obviously, not what the actual rankings are in the NWSL right now, but if we take a look at the talent and how teams are playing, where we would rank teams up. So before I throw it over to Scotty, I'm just going to give what the rankings are at now, post match day 6, headed into match day 7. We got OL Reign ranked number 1. We have the Portland Thorns at number 2, Washington Spirit, who are the second undefeated team, right behind Portland Thorns at number 3. We've got Gotham FC at 4, San Diego Wave at 5, Angel City at 6, the Courage at 7th place, the Houston Dash in 8th. We've got the Kansas City Current starting to climb the table at 9th, Orlando Pride at 10, Racing Louisville at 11, and in last place, we have the Chicago Red Stars. Seems kind of accurate, kind of based on team play in some spots, but Scotty, how would you rank these teams right now?
Yeah, I see where they've fallen and how the games have kind of gone and how they've transpired. But now you're getting into later into the season. We're getting to see the identities of players. We're getting to see players start to understand each other. So my rankings are, I see, and I'm going to be a little off because I have two teams kind of ranked the same.
Okay.
And I'm going to start from the bottom, and then I'll explain where I think those two teams that are equal, what I see right now, as if I was a player or a coach to coach against them. But I think the team that's in the biggest trouble right now is Chicago. They to me look like they're lost. They have talented players. Like all the teams have talented players. It's more about the identity, the shape, the systems that they play, and the understanding and the willingness to want to be in those systems in a sense. So I have Chicago at the bottom, Orlando right above them. Then I have Louisville above them. Then I have Houston, and I think Houston for me is a team that you're always going to get a great effort. Some days they're on, some days they're not. They kind of play their own system every single time, and they take it for what it is. It doesn't seem like they make many changes and try to change based on who they're playing against. They say, this is our style, this is who we are, and here we go. Home or away, it doesn't matter. So there's a team where you got to kind of watch and be like, because if they get hot and get really, really confident, they'll be a hard team to gain points off of. After Houston, I have KC, and I think that's a team we got to really keep our eye on because they're just starting to click, and they've gone through some stuff. They just got announced that they have a Bank of America as a new partner, so they're making and doing things to let those players know that they have their full support in the ownership group, and that's a good thing coming. As Sheva even said to us in her interview, when you know the owners are invested as much as you are, it gives you that much more desire to win for them as much as you are for yourselves. After KC, here's the teams that I think are very equal. The Courage and San Diego. Here's San Diego, a team that's super, super talented. The Courage are a young team, talented, maybe have one of the best midfielders in the world, definitely in the league. But for me, I think I rank the Courage a little higher than San Diego. I think they know who they want to be, and they are gearing up to be that. When I watch San Diego play, I think there are a bunch of talented individuals all kind of playing their own game, and it hasn't yet clicked, but they have points and they get results because they are so massively talented. But for what they're producing on the field, they don't seem, which is surprising to me because I think Stoney's a great coach, and I think she's going to fix this. But it does seem like they kind of go on their own tangents as players, and it's really hard to play as a team when you do that. Above San Diego and the Courage, I have Gotham. Right above them, I have Seattle, and I know that they have the most points. But Seattle right now, and again, no Lavelle is a huge. It's hard for us to really see, but they don't seem like they're that hard to beat. And I know they haven't lost many games. I know they're getting wins, but they're a team that I don't fear. I don't really, when they play, like they could win, they could lose. It wouldn't surprise me, kind of a thing. Above them, Angel City. I think Angel City is going to start hitting their stride real fast. I think they're going to be a team that we're going to have to, once they kind of all understand. And they're also, we saw this weekend, they can move players to different positions and play a different formation or a different tactical adjustment because they have so many good players that understand their role and understand their role in a system or with the team. Above Angel City, I have Washington. And then still number one, until you knock them off, I think Portland's the best team in the league. But I would really love to see Portland play Washington and see, because that'll be a battle of will, basically. Our style versus your style. Two great coaches. You'll get it's not a bigger game than it really is, but Parsons playing against Portland, that'll be interesting to see. But that's the way I see it right now. If I was a player, those would be the teams in order of almost fear of who I wouldn't want to play. Portland would be a game I'd relish it, but to really get into it, that would be a game where, if we lost, it wouldn't be a surprise to me as a player sometimes thinking.
June 23rd, the Portland Thorns take on Washington Spirit. So put it on your calendars, guys. And guess what? I picked the Spirit to be the NWSL champions. You laughed at me, Scotty. I think. I could be wrong. You picked the Thorns, which I think ultimately they will end up being the champions. I kind of think Angel City might get in that conversation. I think they might be in the NWSL championship game. We'll see.
Yeah, Angel City, they got weapons. They got a fun style of play. And, Ertz, if she's done throwing out pitches at baseball games and gets back on the field.
Exactly. That's true.
They'll be super dangerous. They have leadership, their ownership. They're invested, totally invested. Their fan base is great. So Angel City is a team I would definitely fear if I was a player in this league.
Completely, especially with Ertz on the team. I think McCaskill makes a huge difference. The Alyssa Thompson up top, she's just getting better every single week. Kind of rivals Sophia Smith for Portland Thorns. So definitely a matchup we'll be looking forward to, I guess, Washington Spirit, Portland Thorns. For my rankings at the top of the table, Scotty, I think we're kind of equal, but I'll start at the bottom as well. I have Houston Dash at number 12. I think they just have not figured out how they want to play. I think they have phenomenal players. I really like that trio up top with Salmon, Ordonez, and Sanchez, but they haven't produced anything together. And until they do, they haven't proven anything to me. And then I have the Chicago Red Stars. I think for obvious reasons, even Alyssa Nair hasn't played well in goal. Mallory Swanson isn't on the team. Complete mix-up of the midfield is definitely going to rock a team, and they've had a lot of off-the-field things happen to them as well. And I think overall, just holistically approaching the Red Stars, they have a lot to overcome at this point in the season. Then the Orlando Pride, they've started to look pretty good. They got a win over Racing. They got a win over San Diego. They've got some young players who want to win and they want to perform. And I think they want to prove that they deserve to be in this league. So I see the Pride just being a little ahead, but I don't see them being the best team or really even in the middle of the table at any point in the season. Then Racing Louisville, some new players. However, Urseg Pickett, I think, certainly hold down this team. DeMello and Howell in the midfield, and then they bring in Jordan Baggett, who I think could potentially change this team. She came over from the Washington Spirit. She got traded, which was a huge, crazy thing to me because she was a huge part of the Spirit when she first got there. But I think she can help this Racing team once she gets involved in the system. Then I have OL Reign at the bottom, in the 8th place. I think they just, again, have not figured out what they can do. They've started to use lefts of Sofia Huerta in the attack. They've gotten her kind of a little bit closer to the goal, but they, again, want to continue to allow Haitama, Balser to score. You're right, once Lavelle gets back into the mix, but the thing is this being a World Cup year, that changes so much that once these players come back from the World Cup, if they don't have injuries, if they have, lag of sleep because they're going to be traveling from New Zealand and Australia, there's going to be a lot of changes. And what'd you say?
Tired people.
And that certainly affects the play. But I think with Fishlock in there, and I think with Balser Haitama, that can certainly change the team. But I don't see them being the Shield winners this season. Then Gotham FC, Yasmin Ryan has been huge for that team. Lynn Williams has been fun to watch. However, it's so hard because I would put them at the top, but this league is so competitive that I put them in 7th place. They still haven't proven especially with that loss to Kansas City, that they deserve to be a little bit higher. Then I had the North Carolina Courage making the playoffs. I definitely think they will this season, especially after what happened last season. Caroline had a phenomenal game. Lucy's starting, putting Ryan Williams in the wide areas. Like you said, the possessions looked really good for North Carolina. And I think as the young players start to get better, I could see them moving up. But right now, I see North Carolina making the playoffs, but not being the best. Angel City FC, I have in 5th place, which I agree. I think with Julie Ertz in there, I think with Alyssa Thompson continuing to get big minutes, and she wants to make that World Cup team, so she's going to want to continue to score goals, and she can do it on her own. I put Angel City in 5th. And then I have the Wave in 4th, because I think with Casey Stoney and the standard that she sets, she's such a hard coach to play for. And I could see her, Alex Morgan in the locker room. You don't want to upset Alex Morgan. There's definitely a standard there. And then Naomi Gurma on the back line. I think those players and that coach really impact that team. And I think there's just been a drop off right now, but I could see them starting to get better. Kansas City Current, number 3. Certainly you have Dabini on the team. We haven't seen Gautrat back in the lineup. We've seen players like DiBernardo in there. I think with, like you said, the things they're doing off the field. And when teams have shakeups in the coaching staff, they tend to progress a little bit better. So I say Kansas City at 3, Washington Spirit at number 2, undefeated. They've got really good pieces. Trinity Rodman started to look electric, and then Portland Thorns, they're still at number 1. And until a team comes in and absolutely annihilates them and makes them lose by 2 or 3 goals, there's no way Thorns are going to be knocked off that number 1 spot.
Yeah, it's funny how it's such a competitive league, and it's so good that, you can have – we both have Seattle, who's number 1 in the rankings, but lower down and that's probably one of the reasons is because we expect more from them with as many players as they have. And they didn't really have a lot of movement. So you're expecting them to get right into the flow. Whereas San Diego's playing that, they don't have Korniak in the midfield. So they're playing with Shaw's getting way more minutes. So are they trying different things? The one time they said they were in a box, then they were in a diamond, then they were in a triangle. So is she taking the early parts of the season to get herself ready and be full on at the end of the season, which every team kind of really wants? Portland is just a well-oiled machine that just keeps. And now you see Washington, with Parsons putting his stamp on it. I will say this, because there are so many young players in the league. I think one of the things we lose sight on as fans, as coaches sometimes, is these young players come into this league where they're the stars at club. They're the stars in college. And being a star, sometimes in the positions they play, and we usually are seeing players that get recruited are coming as forwards or attacking midfielders. So their defensive responsibilities when they're younger are either not there or not well taught. And as they get into the league, like you said, Alyssa Thompson's playing way better. But it's her defensive side, I think, that is allowing her to be so good offensively. Just like there's no question about it. Right now, I think, besides Lynn Williams scoring so many goals, Trinity Rodman is right now front runner for MVP, the way she's taking that team and doing what she does. But it's not just her offensive work. It's not just her scoring. It's not just her assists. It's the willingness to defend so high up the pitch. Like against Carolina, she pretty much shut the right side down and scored a goal off of her defensive work and helped them get that victory. And then this weekend, yes, she gets goals, she gets assists, but her work rate off the ball. And the same with Alyssa Thompson. These younger players and Jaden Shaw, they're going to start learning their defensive responsibility, their defensive technique themselves as an individual, and they're going to get better in understanding the game better at a much higher level than, not that they're not ready to play, they just haven't played against the exact same competition as themselves early in their career, so it takes them a little bit of time. But the good thing is, man, they're fast learners, and the league just continues to just keep getting better and better and better. And that would be, I'm glad that teams are coming in. I'm glad there's new teams, but I hope it doesn't hurt how well the league is as far as talented players. Like we talked with Sheva, and she's on the bench right now, and she was a star in college. She's a starter for her national team. That's a real hard thing to know. Like, I'm coming off the bench now. Yes, there is someone better than me. You don't want to ever say that as a player. How do I go about that in training? How do I earn my spot? How do I earn my minutes? And that's something young players need to look at, because coaches have ideas, and maybe we're not always the best communicators with, especially young and youth players. So they don't know why they're sitting the bench. They don't know why they're not starting. For a young player, the most important thing for a young player at a young age is to be on the field, to be a starter, to get their minutes. And when it's not happening, coaches, I think, need to tell players a little bit more of why. Hey, this team plays like this and you play more like this. It's not going to be good for us. It's not going to be beneficial. Watch on the sidelines, understand it. And I think sometimes these players have to go through that when they leave college. And for some of them, and for the way they handle it, I think it's amazing, because I don't know if I could handle coming off the bench at the same age that these guys are doing it in their career. I would have had a huge problem with it. And I don't know where my career would have went, because I wanted to be a starter. I always thought I was the best player. But the way they handle it, and then how these teams kind of go and flow, and Endo comes off, then she starts. This week, she was probably the best player for LA. And 2 weeks ago, came off the bench. Like, it's just the way the league plays, and the girls are much better at handling when their number's not called, but they're ready for when it is called. And I think that's a testament to the players. It's a testament to the coaches that the players are able to do that at this league at this such a high level.
I agree. I think a great example of that at a young age is Olivia Moultrie, who's 17 years old, and her career has taken off this season. And before this season, she was barely seeing the field. Granted, she was so young, and the coaches want to take their time progressing her and getting her ready for this level of play. But at her young age, I can imagine she never sat the bench. She probably played 90 minutes up until she was 15 years old. So seeing how she has gone from even being a bench player right now, like, she didn't start against North Carolina. She comes on the field, really impacts the goals. She impacted the match. You're right. And I think some of these players, even Sheva said it herself, is she sees other people maturing through their career and how their career is taking them different places. And she understands the NWSL is ever changing, ever evolving. You don't know what team you're going to be on next. You can be a superstar on one roster and you can never see the field on the other. And it just depends what system you're in. I think the NWSL does that one of the best across all leagues, because they're not just putting their best players on the field. They want to win, and they know there has to be tactical adjustments to that. And that's why these rankings change week in and week out. Like, I would say the third spot to the 8th place is going to be like constantly changing. We have no idea who's going to be in there next week. I think the first place.
Totally agree. Really, Chicago and Orlando, and we said it early in the thing when the NWSL didn't even start. We said, can Adriana and Marta teach these young players? And I think they're doing a great job. Like, what they have to work with, what they are. They're being leaders. Marta's finally getting back onto the field and getting real quality minutes instead of coming off the bench. But I agree, Houston, you have them at the bottom. I have them in 8th, but you don't know who's going to show up, and that's why they're ranked so low, is because the parity in the league and the ability in the league and the talent in the league is so great that a team like Houston, who game 2 of the season, I thought, wow, Houston, man, they were one of the top teams. But you're right. You bring in Ordonez, who's a player that likes the ball into her, flown into her higher up. And last year they played more, like through ball kind of plays and more ticky-tack kind of to get through in isolation. Well, now you got a different type of forward up there, a true old school number 9. And it's going to take some time for these players who played a different style and a different system last year to implement how they get used to playing with her with a totally different style than that's brand new to them all. So, yeah, I agree. The league is so good and so many talented players that next week we could come back and maybe have the whole list reversed in a sense, except for I think the 2 bottom teams are – for me, Chicago and Orlando, I think they're gonna hang around that bottom of the pack pretty much all year.
Definitely Chicago. I could see Orlando staying 10th or 12th just because after last season, they definitely have to pick it up. And you would think Seb Hines would want to make that better. Even Marta, now that she's playing this season, make that better. But who knows? I mean, this league is so competitive. It's so fun week in and week out. We have no idea what's going to happen. However, in MLS this week, we saw a lot of things happen that we wanted to see. There were some coaching changes headed into MatchDay 12. The 2 big ones were Chicago Fire and New York Red Bulls, the only changes. So for the Fire, they fired their head coach, Ezra Henderson. Right now the Fire are in 14th place in the Eastern standings with 2 wins, 3 losses, 5 draws. Chicago named Frank Klopas head coach for the remainder of the 2023 season. He was previously Chicago's head coach from 2011 to 13. Plus, he held a brief interim stint at the end of the 2021 season. Chicago plays St. Louis this weekend, which is a huge matchup. Scotty, Chicago Fire firing their coach, bringing in someone that we've seen before and not be successful. What do you think of this change? Positive, negative, both?
Maybe a little bit of both. You never want to see someone lose their job, but that's the nature of the beast. That's the business we're in. And Ezra didn't do a good enough job in Chicago. Now, part of the problem is he doesn't have a lot to work with. The Chicago Fire remind me a little bit of the Chicago Bears. They don't like to spend money, in a sense. They don't like to make a lot of big changes. They don't like a lot of, it's always, we got a team, we got fans coming, that's good enough kind of a thing. So when I look at the Fire, and that wasn't their MO back in the day. They have a big foreign community in the area. I remember when I used to be playing against the Chicago Fire, I think there was like 4 Polish players on the team from their national team, whether they had just retired from international, but like really, really good players. And Klopas was one of those players with that group, and he was a good player. He's born in Greece, but he's an American. He's played on the national team. I played some games with him. But for me, Frank Klopas, when they make this change, okay, the players, you don't want to see your coach get fired, but when they do make a change because we're having a bad season and they take the coach and he's the responsibility in a sense, well, you're hoping like, okay, they're invested. They want us to be good. They're not going to let the season get away from us. And then they hire Frank Klopas, who has proven Montreal and Chicago twice that, and the Chicago, both times he left Chicago for personal reasons. I think one year he got a better offer for indoor maybe. One time it was more to be with his family. I'm not exactly positive. It was a little bit of time ago. But it doesn't, if I'm a player on Chicago, it's almost like they throwing the season away. They're throwing a year of my career away. Like there's got to be, put an assistant coach in charge, put an intern. It sounds like from the interviews that he's got him to the end of the year. It's not like they're even looking outside the box or anything like this season's a wash. For me as a player, like you can't mess with my career like that. I want to learn. I want to constantly be getting, and I'm not saying I'm not going to learn from Frank Klopas, but I don't think this hiring is being made for the future. It's just to get through this season. We had to do something. We don't want to lose any more fans coming because we didn't do anything about our coach. But for me to hire Klopas, it's not saying we're invested. We're going for it. It doesn't seem like, I mean, if you could throw a season, that's what it kind of looks like to me. Like, don't worry about it. Win what you can, lose whatever. You're fine with us. You're always going to get your paycheck. Let's just make it to next year kind of. And as a player, then it becomes hard to play because you want my everything on the field. Well, I want your everything from an ownership group, from a coaching staff, from everybody. We're all invested in this together. And I think that's one of the reasons St. Louis is so good. Because it's everybody, the fans. Like they don't have to ask the fans to show up. They're just coming. They love it. They want to be there. They want to be a part of it. They want to be a reason that they're winning. For me, I understand the change with Hendrickson, but to bring Klopas in to me just is a Band-Aid. It's not going to heal anything. It's not going to make anything better. It's just going to cover stuff up.
The biggest red flag in this is the fact that he held a brief interim stint at the end of 2021. And they decided not to move forward with him. So it's like, if it didn't work before, what makes you think 2-3 years later it's going to work now with all the changes we've seen in MLS? I think it would be different if they had, like you said, named him interim and then they decided to take their time looking for the next coach. Granted, we are headed into match day 12, so we are started to get in the thick of the season, but it's still early enough where they can bring someone in who they trust and they really want to build from. But I agree, it doesn't really give you a lot of encouragement from an ownership standpoint. And the biggest stat that I saw, which I think just covers Chicago in general, is Chicago has had 8 coaches since 2007, and only one of them spent 3 full seasons with them. Just shows you is like they have not found a long-term solution. So if it's bringing in a sporting director who knows what they're doing, a GM who knows what they're doing, they're tallying from players who've been with them for a long time. Hey, who would you like to see come in and coach? What do you want this team to look like? We want to be better. We want to hold ourselves to a standard. I think those changes should have been made and those conversations should have been had. However, can Klopas come in 2023 and make some changes? Has he learned in different roles he's been in? Who knows? But yeah, I agree. I think it's a positive in the sense that they're moving on because they are second to last place, but it's bringing in the next guy isn't the huge, I don't know, big ticket guy they should have.
Yeah, I don't think they did enough.
Yeah. However, New York Red Bulls, they mutually part ways with their head coach, Gerard Struber. The Red Bulls are dead last in 15th place in the Eastern standings. They've got 1 win, 4 losses, 6 draws. And Struber said, he enjoyed his time at the Red Bulls. However, it was clear that he wanted to return to Europe at the end of the season at the latest. It was extremely difficult for him to live here completely without his family. He said he informed the club earlier enough about his wishes, and they came to the agreement to part ways. Off of that, it sounds like Struber always had his sights set on going back to Austria, where he's from. So Red Bulls bring in Troy Lesane, who has been bumped up from the assistant position coach with the Red Bulls. And this weekend, the Red Bulls play NYCFC. Let's start with Struber already saying that he has his sights set on headed back home. As an ownership group, what does that tell you when he tells you that early on in the season? Do you stick with him or see what he can do and how he can impact your team? Or do you say, hey, this isn't going to work. Let's part before it gets bad?
I think for me, I whenever he had that conversation, there should have been slow steps. And it doesn't seem like these were slow steps going in that, but you got to get rid of them because the team's going to feel it. You can't hide it. You know, if you're missing home, you're missing home. At the end of my career, that was one of the factors of why I retired. You're on the road constantly. So even for me, I wasn't in another country. My wife was here, but I was on the road so much that we would spend 1 day, 2 days a week together at best, and then back on the road, back with the team, back here, back training, doing this. So I understand that part of it, but when you as a coach say that you're wanting to leave and go back, you're basically done. You're done. Like that's what my same thing when Krieger said I'm going to retire. Like we have a whole season. Why you can't tell us now? Like I don't want anything to veer my path. And listen, the Red Bull have nothing going on offensively. They're doing nothing offensively. That's where their biggest problems are, really, in my opinion. But I like this hiring. Here's a guy who's spent 19 years in the pro coaching, not pro, coaching college, coaching pro. He's worked his way up. He's played places where you could tell this guy just wanted to continually grow in the game, grow in the game as a player. Go here, you went here. He's probably overlooked as a player, went to the College of Charleston, who's always got a decent squad, played for the Battery, played for the Wilmington Hammerheads. You know, like those were both decent teams in the years where he was playing. There was quality players. There was good coaching. He's learned. He's pushed his way. He's eager. He's young. He wants to be there. He's been in the system. He knows his players. This hiring, to me, makes sense. The Frank Klopas is like on the other end of it. Like they're even saying, like, we know there's people whose paths have started this way. Pep started this way. You start with the younger teams. You work your way up. You learn how to develop players. You learn how players think. You learn how to interact with younger players. Now you're on the pro scene. I think this hiring makes way more sense, and I'm rooting for him. You know, the Red Bull used to be the Metro Stars. The Metro Stars offered me a contract twice, actually. I'm from the area, so I always kind of want them to do pretty well. So I'm hoping this turns out in the best interest for the Red Bull because they're good for the community. They're good for the MLS, and hopefully this guy gives other young coaches the aspiration to keep following your dream and keep working no matter where you're coaching at right now.
Chicago Fire has moved on from their coach. New York Red Bulls have moved on from their coach. Maybe Sporting KC and LA Galaxy can take a note out of their books to move on because both those teams are at the bottom of the standings right now. Greg Vanier and Peter Vermees have to go. I mean, just at this point in the season, especially with LA Galaxy and all the things that's happening off the field, Kansas City not performing at all, they get 1 win. It's you have to move on, and it's part of the game. It's part of the gig. If you're not getting the results after match day 11, what makes you think things are going to change underneath the current coaching standard?
Vanny, again, well, I'm going to say it again. The fans told us in the summer, midsummer last year, they were telling us they don't just want Vanny out. They want Kowalski out. They want everybody. They want people that are like, these guys don't even seem scared that they lose games or fear it or care. It's like they've got their jobs. They're always going to be there. They're taking care of each other. They're all buddies. The Galaxy Chicharito comes out and he says, this has to change. Things have to change. Your players are coming out. He's saying we hide from the media. We hide from the truth. This is a player on your team. Then you look at Kansas City And they interviewed Johnny Russell the other day, who's their captain, and he says, I have no idea how to fix this. I mean, you have a huge problem, Kansas City, when your players are saying, at least Chicharito's saying there has to be change. We have to work harder. We have to do something different. Johnny Russell's saying there's no fix to this. This is, I don't even know how to fix it. How, if that's what your captain's saying, what are the meetings the captain and the coach are having? Because those meetings are happening every single day. If they're not, that might be part of the problem in Kansas City. Kansas City, listen, tell you, Vermes is doing a bad job. And the way I know it is Alexi Lalas, his buddy, his friend, has called for him to be fired. Like, I was shocked that I heard it. I was shocked that it came out because they usually, like I say, they're a little fraternity. They kind of take care of each other. They all have their jobs within the business. They all talk each other up. But he's calling for him to be gone. And I totally agree. Like, what did you do? Save yourself a week by winning a game in Seattle? Seattle didn't look like they were ready to play. Didn't look like they cared to play that day. You know, sometimes you get on that field in Seattle and the ball bounces all crazy ways. It's got a lot of the pellets in there because it's an NFL stadium. So you won a game, but you haven't looked good. The game it wasn't like you played amazing and you're like, okay, here's our things to come. I think both of these coaches have worn out their welcome with their teams. And if he wasn't had such a good history in his coaching and everything, I think Bradley should be a little bit nervous too. Toronto has not looked good at all either. The other teams, Charlotte's making some changes, played some different players, moving up in the standings, getting some wins. Montreal's making some strides, making some wins. KC and LA, listen, I think I'm going to see the exact same thing I've been seeing all week, all year. It's nothing going to change when they come. They might get a result, they might not, but it's not going to be good soccer. The players don't look like they really care about each other and want to win for each other. So I agree with you. 2 changes, yes, made. One looks like it all for the right reasons. One looks like a Band-Aid, a cover-up. But these other 2 teams, and then how do these players feel? Like, it's hard losing every game. And Kansas City's not tying. They're losing. They're losing a lot of games. They're not just not winning. They're losing. Some teams aren't winning, but they're getting ties. Toronto's got a lot of ties. So, okay, you're still in games. It could have went either way. I can kind of see that. LA Galaxy and Kansas City just bad soccer right now. And it doesn't look like there's any change on the horizon with who they have in charge right now.
LA Galaxy is like the Dallas Cowboys of the NFL, or I guess of MLS. There's this sense of like they've always been held to a standard. Like they are the club that everyone looks to. David Beckham played there. Like everyone wants to be LA Galaxy. And the fact that they're not at that standard anymore should be a huge red flag for the ownership, that they need to get back there. And they have players speaking out. I've covered a handful of leagues, of games, of sports, and I've never heard a player come out and say, I have no idea how we fix this. We don't look good. That's a huge statement for a player to come out to the media and say, I don't have a fix. Because like you said, I have no idea what the conversations are between the captain and the coach, but they are probably super ugly. And if there's no changes happening, it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future until they do make a change in that head coaching position or they make a change with players on the field. But yeah, I agree. We'll definitely be keeping our eyes on the Sporting Kansas City, LA Galaxy. The Red Bulls are playing NYCFC. We've got Chicago Fire playing St. Louis. Those are going to be a handful of matches we'll be keeping our eyes on this weekend. Before we go, we have something we saw this week that we both really liked. Scotty, you have a really good one. And if also, before we get going, if people listening can help us, we've got Yellow Penny Award, which is a really good name for this segment. But for something we like seeing, that's so boring. If you guys can write in, comment, help us with an idea of how we can rename this segment. I've been brainstorming some ideas. I'm not going to throw it out there, but I'm asking for your help. So, Scotty, what did you see this week that you liked?
For this week, again, I think our show is NWSL, MLS, and we do cover both, but the NWSL is just so intriguing to me. Such a cool league, so much going on, such good soccer, but then off the field. So since we had At the Football on, I've been watching At the Football, and that's where I saw it first. I saw a picture of Allie Long getting her stretched out, her neck stretched. She has her twins with her. One's eating, having a bottle on top of her. The other one's pulling on her. Just what these women go through that we as men don't have to go through. And just how awesome they are and how they go out there and they fight for the team and they care about each other and they battle. It's just, again, like we want these interviews. They come on, these girls come on, these women come on, and I'm blown away by how mature and how powerful and how strong they are. And then they use their voices. But when I saw Allie Long with her two boys, getting worked out for the game, getting ready for the game, and also being a mother at the same time, it was just such a cool thing. And I just makes me like the league that much more. It's cool seeing the kids on the field afterwards, but they're doing mother and being moms right up till the first whistle is blown. And I think it's amazing that they can be able to do that and then be level-headed and clear-headed and ready to play and ready to get after the game and fight for their team and fight for their organizations. I was just blown away by that picture, and I just thought it was one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in sport.
I love that picture. We'll show that here. If you're watching us on YouTube, we'll show it on our social media as well. But I agree. And the fact that she's come back and been such a great player for Gotham, I can't imagine the stuff she's having to take care of off the field. We know Alex Morgan travels with her daughter, Charlie. I saw on social media that Crystal Dunn was traveling with her son. I think they're staying on the East Coast because they take on the Dash this upcoming weekend after taking on the Courage. But the duties of being a mom and also being a player, it's really cool to see these teams kind of spotlight that in unique ways that we don't get to see as fans at home. My favorite thing this week is not soccer related, but it's sports related. I am not a great golfer, but I am here in San Diego, and I know that Torrey Pines is a phenomenal golf course. So I played there, and the 15th hole was my favorite thing I saw this weekend. I mean, you've got the hole goes down, so you're hitting it down, but you get the view of La Jolla Shores, the waves crashing. You've got like all the houses up on the hill. I'll share a picture. I took like 15 million of them. But it was so cool to see. And I love being outside, and I love San Diego, and golf is a sport that you kind of get to be outside and, play around. I don't have to be the best. And I'm sure they're going to have to like completely renovate the turf there because I was so bad, but that's okay. We were there to have fun, and it was a cool sight to see.
One time, I'm not a very good golfer, and I very, very rarely ever play. And someday maybe I'll tell you my golf story. It's hilarious. Everyone makes me tell it when they hear it. But I was asked one time as a player, I did an interview, and they asked me if I didn't play soccer, what would I be a sports person? And I love sports, so I would be a sports person. But I said I'd be a golfer, and they said why? And I was like, well, have you ever watched golf? It's like the most beautiful landscape. You're always in a great place. Everything's pretty. You're either it's at the West Coast, East Coast, doesn't matter. You're in the mountains, you're on the shorelines. So beautiful. And I said, the other thing is, once we get a little bit of rain, I get to go in the clubhouse and have a couple beers and come back out. It's like I never play in the rain. It's always beautiful weather, So I would love to play golf. I'm terrible at it, but if I was another pro, I think golf would be the thing because you could play a little bit longer too. And then when you're too old, then you go on the senior tour and you play a little longer. And it's just it's a good place to hang out with your friends and enjoy the weather, enjoy the scenery, basically.
Yeah, the camaraderie. The other part of the view there was like the hang gliders. That's huge in San Diego. I think the Farmers Open plays at Torrey Pines, but when you see it on TV, it's completely different than playing there. I completely agree. I will say though, I played 3 rounds in 4 days of 18 holes of golf, and I was exhausted. Like, I don't know if I'm getting old or if I've never really played that much golf before, and I don't know completely what I'm doing, but I was beat. But yeah, no, it's definitely a fun sport, and something like between like the fashion side of it, it's kind of an expensive sport. I've only bought like a box set of clubs, but yeah, I definitely know my husband spends money on golf, and I know it can be very expensive. But yeah, no, if you guys have never been to Torrey Pines and you're a golfer, you have to go. It's a bit pricier if you're not a local, but it's a beautiful course. So yeah, that's my recommendation. Favorite thing I saw this week. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Straight from the Pitch this week. We will be following NWSL, MLS this week, all the things happening on and off the pitch in soccer. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at SFTP Pod, and we will see you guys back here next Wednesday.
Have a great week.